Chapter 23. It's hard to be a saint in the city. The story so far. In order to make effective moves in the game of time, Latsite Wago, as it is called by the Singularity, Jack Carriquazian has been forced to accept their logical overview, but also clings to his own, making concentration on the game doubly difficult. Meanwhile, Sam Oakenhurst has been absorbed into the greatest of the Chaos Captains, Billy Bob Big, who believes she has taken his power and wisdom by drinking from the Red Cup. The Rose refuses the game, but remains in her ship, eagerly interested in the outcome and observing much of the play through her scale screens, which have been adapted for the purpose. She sniffs for those connecting scents which will help her form a picture and witness Jack's learning the story of the Fishlings. Chapter 2. How Capricorn Schultz betrayed his great main type and abducted the Fishlings. In the course of her extensive ether travelling, the Spammagane had become completely organic, nowadays resembling a stable scale of well-fed sea mammal, sweet-featured, trailing impossibly long mustachios of glowing baleen and glittering coral-coloured tentacles, her forequarters resembling a vast tropical cuttlefish 1,000,000 miles wide, her lovely eyes full of wide astonishment. Her intellect was in a constant state of activity. She existed in deep, co-dimensional symbiosis with her crew, whose well-being was her motherly concern. Her crew loved her with unreasoning loyalty and an almost childish passion. The patterns of these linked emotions were a powerful natural talisman protecting the Spammagane, with the result that she had virtually no traditional enemies. Even the Singularity had to treat with the Spammagane. The Fishlings, who had conjured themselves into sentient existence around her, created in her a profound maternal pride which added to their mutual invulnerability. In all their ether travelling, all the dangers of their deep explorations and high-scaling adventures, they were protected by the massive power of their mutual love and their relish for existence. The love between the Spammagane and her Fishlings was celebrated throughout the multiverse. Captain Wop Wop of the Spammagane was an admired merchant venturer in her own right, courageous and clever and shrewd and risky as a rolled rat. She too had changed conspicuously under the fluid logic of the second ether, and her face had come to look almost purely piscine. Hers was perhaps the most sublimely beautiful face in all the multiverse, while her generosity and active sympathy were a watchword amongst even those munificent and profligate Chaos Captains who spoke of her in the same reverential breath as Captain Billy Bob Big, their exemplar, and, upon appropriate occasions, for all the Chaos Captains were fiercely free, their mentor. Ultimately, the Fishlings began to form simple societies, separating into a number of tribes. The leaders were identified by the name of their tribe. Thus, Perch was chief of the Perch tribe, Bream, chief of Breams, and so on. There were at least 15 tribes, each with distinctive appearance and customs, including roach, grayling, salmon, tench, chub, char, eel, zander, barbel, pike, rudd, and dace. But their rapid evolution was to prove their downfall, and Capricorn Schultz would set a false attractor to lure them over, using the boom whap he had stolen from Professor Pop. And everyone's wrecked on Main Street from drinking unholy blood. His plan was to win the confidence of the infamous Homeboy Tong and become their chief accountant. Schultz departed, the Fishlings swarming behind him, all but Chief Tench, a singularly intelligent creature who, having failed to warn the others of its misgivings, had elected to stay with Spammer, even though it had almost torn his soul apart to do so. For the false attractor was unusually convincing, and had created all kinds of seductive secondary realities. Delivered over to the evil ministrations of Mrs. Reg, co-desk to the instrument, the fishlings would be fed into the maw of the original insect, and thus, the Singularity hoped, bring their legendary patron to their aid in the conquest of the second ether. Only blood could activate the necessary equation. But although carelessness and an innate sporting sensibility, Capricorn Schultz lost his stolen charges when he failed to refold his boom whap, causing his false attractor to dissipate. The fishlings vanished. Now not even the infamous banker to the homeboy Tong knew where they had gone. "My fishlings," cries the wretched monster. "Oh, bring me back my fishlings." And so loved is the Spammer game that almost every Chaos Captain, wherever they are, on whatever business in the multiverse, rallies to her cri de soir. And for love of Pearl Peru came fearless Frank Force, hero of the Singularity, to dare the lavender field and face the risk of massive psychic reordering. 5 times fearless Frank Force and his ship, the right course for recovery, had corkscrewed down the misty maze of tunnels ripped through the fabric of the multiverse by previous Singularity voyages. The tunnel's boundaries were announced only by the subtlest changes of lavender shades. Following crude charts and hearsay, Captain Force survived to enter the Poppy and the Poppies, where a kind of civilization had developed. It had made Frank Force its king and bequeathed to him his uncanny fold suit, which allowed his paragon of all that was virtuous in the Singularity to pass along the megaflow without damage to his surroundings. He was heading for Ko-O-Ko, the lost universe, in the belief that the fishlings had found a home there. Meanwhile, evil Freddy Force, whose machinations allowed him to become old Reg's favoured number 2, believes his noble twin to be dead, and has captured little Rapoldo. "I shall try my luck again," he declares, "and next time I shall bring you back the Mangutur they put your father in." Chuckling, he departs on his stolen Vesper Vortex navigator. He hopes to trade information with Capricorn Schultz at an agreed rendezvous. In those days, Capricorn's rank was only temporary. "My fishlings. Where are my fishlings?" The whole multiverse reverberates with her agonized plea. "Bring me back my fishlings." A scarlet cloud billows out from the Spam again. A spume which rages with painful yellows and dark rocky greens at its dissipating edges. She scales recklessly down towards the dangerous demon worlds of Limbo, where echoes alone rule, their meaning forgotten, their origins lost, where all that is left of our former gods is a heartless appetite. Deeply she dives downscale, all her screens alive with rapidly growing and fading perspectives, and formulae in every level of the spectrum. Astral rays blazing a path through the roiling fractures of dissipating chaos. Pale blues and golds, pale lemons and pinks, teasing their way into the spaces which always grow between proliferating matter. Deeply she dives, as if the pain of it will replace the pain in her heart. Her recklessness terrifies even Captain Wop Wop, who begs her for all their sakes to change course and to go upscale again, at least until they have discussed their predicament. Ghosts lick at their souls. Forgotten godlings taste the scent of them. greedy echoes longing for the substance Spammer can provide in such magnificent quantity. "They begin to hunt us," says Captain Wop Wop. "Here our love has no power." What? Spammer is dreamy, lost, drowning in her sorrow. "If the fishlings are in limbo, Spammer dear, there is no saving them, just as we cannot save ourselves." What? Are you frightened, Wop Wop dear? "I, Spammer, never more so. Is this not fruitless? Tell me you think it is. Do not extinguish us like this, Spammer, feeding the damned at last." But before Spammer can answer, news comes over the experimental omniphone. Little Rupoldo has escaped Freddy Force's captivity and is stowed away on a singularity ship. He has overheard many crucial conversations. Fearless Frank Force has discovered Ko, the lost universe, and is even now seeking the fishlings there. The Spammer gain quickens with hope, and she begins the long, exhausting scale jump via the old Mars scaling station, which will return them to the second ether. The singularity will try to block her way. She will disguise herself as one of their number. Chapter 24. Moi poissonnette, c'est vrai. Sam Oakenhurst made his play and sat back to take a breather. He suspected the Rose of having something to do with Pearl Peru's failure to accept him. The Rose had always been jealous of Pearl. He remembered how ill-tempered she had become when he had first taken an interest in Pearl's adventures. He was not sure of his feelings. He still loved the Rose, yet he had yearned so long for Pearl Peru. Now that he was denied her, he believed himself betrayed. "I could do nothing but offer her my best," he would write in his journal. "I had acquired the key to positive pain. This permitted me an almost limitless power, which was sought by Captain Billy Bob Begg herself, whose own strange carapace had endowed her with peculiar aches and agonies. I was able to translate all this pain into daring battle plays and counter moves, with nothing to fear but death, and no longer fearing that. We had the whole multiverse to play for, with immortality the pot of the day. This understanding brought her a certain ease and sometimes wild joy. Initially, I could find no links to help me reveal the deeper solutions she needed. Yet sometimes I felt as if she were eating me alive, but absently, as one might chew upon a forgotten piece of gum. It's a game with all winners and all losers, depending on their luck and judgment, I told Jack. I will admit that I was bitter, that he should have the role I so coveted. But if one of us was to be a winner, rather than both, I accepted that he was the better player. When we had first parted to go to our identities and play La Zeit Wago, a game of time, I had told him spitefully that his identity was obvious, while he could always look in the mirror. In my case, all I had left of myself were my original eyes, now mere optic options. Captain Billy Bob was paying attention to the screen where little Rupoldo had successfully hooked them into the Singularity's senders. I leaned forward over little Rupoldo's pixing shoulder and watched. Old Reg, his toothbrush moustache bristling with urgency, his round glasses angry with cold reflections, his tie a tight knot in his throat, addressed the Singularity's noblest hero. There are 5 freescalers of Hume origin and 3 Chaos Engineers with the power to freescale. You, Frank Force, against all 8 Humes, We do not know how many followers of the first beast, all those sliplings and swiftlings. You, Frank Force, are the only singularist with the means of emulating their skills. You achieve this wholesomely, through rational, scientific rather than metaphysical method. Your mathematics are clean. Fate and the poppy and the poppies have provided you with an uncanny fold suit which permits you to roam almost at will through the second ether. I therefore adjoin you to seek the fishlings wherever they have flown, even to Ko-O-Ko, the lost universe, and return them to the spam again. Thus shall we ensure the powerful Freescaler's loyalty to our cause, guaranteeing our conquests. You are further adjoined to avoid the presence of the outlaw venturer, Pearl Peru, at cost of withdrawal of the desk, leaving you unprotected against the lust of the original insect and consigned to perpetual shame. Excommunicated. Fearless Frank Force received this news with considerable dismay. His whole purpose in convincing old Reg to let him seek the fishlings was so that at length Pearl Peru would look on him with favour, turning her attention away from the loathsome Bully Bop. He was not to know recent events had overtaken him. Bully Bop had used his lover's power over Pearl Peru to try and bring her to Capricorn Schultz's confederacy. This had sickened her, and at last confirmed her common sense, which she had been ignoring. In disgusted rage, she had freed herself from his emotional glamour. His loathsome influence was broken. But her caution towards the singularity and its servants remained. Furious and frustrated, Bullybop takes the blue cup and absorbs Paul Minkt. A further mistake. He rushes to join Pearl's enemies, but is incautious and is in turn absorbed. See, I told little Rapoldo. Under the deadly authority of the singularity, Frank Force becomes a creature unable to follow its conscience or its desires. This, little Rapoldo, is the path of death. This is what would conquer us and win the game of time. We must throw ourselves into the turbulence of unknown scales and seek the lost universe of Ko-O-Ko. We must seek and survive the pain. These words were relayed. There was a silence in the great control room as the crew considered the meaning of my decision. Then, in accord, they offered up a cheer. We're with you, dear main type, to the ends of the multiverse if need be. I gave orders for rapid, angular scaling, simultaneously moving through time and space as well as scale. It would be agony for us all. Frank Force passes us by, his uncanny fold suit pulping and repulping as he chooses the notorious underside. He considers fresh equations. She will not take it kindly, he says, if I kill Bullybop. Frank Force does not realize that Pearl Peru has had her last encounter with Bullybop. This encounter will become legendary as the conflict at the field of the blue pearl crocus. Bullybop had returned, he said, with Pearl's spare liver shield, which he had borrowed. It was a ruse. He was Bullybop in appearance, but already the half-demon Baron Pin was in control of him, and Pin favoured the taste of Minkt. The moment they were alone amongst the crocuses, Pearl's instinct, actually Jack's memory, told her Bullybop retained nothing of his original character. Paul Minkt's features, still masked, gloated at her, horribly familiar to Sam Oakenhurst, now linked in. Nothing had warned him of Sam Oakenhurst's memory and experience. Such a combination was unimaginable to him. Baron Pin did not reveal himself, but let Paul Minkt blossom and define the character, with the result that Pearl's sense of loathing increased enormously. She immediately developed a physical aversion for the creature who had once held her with the power of a deep addiction. She craved now to destroy Bullybop. Jack's experience and instincts rescued her. Still linked to Captain Billy Bob, but drawn temporarily to Pearl with Jack's active help, Sam Oakenhurst remained terrified of his old enemy. Paul Minkt had not long preceded him into the second ether. Only through this unprecedented double equation was Mr. Minkt resisted. At the end, employing furious force, Sam Oakenhurst almost killed himself and his whole gestalt. But at last it was done in a moment. Raging and vicious, Pin Minkt fought these unnaturally novel mathematics and lost. "Much obliged, Sam," says Jack Caraquasian, while Purpuroo stares coldly down at her ruined ex-lover. And Sam Oakenhurst, whose co-option to Pearl's cause can only be brief, which was only possible because of his enduring obsession and Jack's talent for innovation, returns wholly to Captain Billy Bob Begg. Much obliged. I am relieved. I have no liking for such daringly unconventional moves. My admiration for Jack Caraquasian, however, increases. We are short a Bully Bob, a Minkt, and a Baron Pin, and that cannot be a minus. We have taken control of the logic. The angels are devouring each other. I can still hear echoes of their logic, their conflict. Don't mention it, Jack, I say. Jack had taught me the crossover technique, which was to seal my fate. I had occupied two characters at the same time, playing them in harness. An impossible triumph. Chapter 25. The masked buckaroos leap for freedom. It was impossible to be a freescaler and a chaos engineer. That was the received wisdom before little Rapaldo cleared the great gnat and raced home on a barrel stave. In order to travel, the engineers manipulated their multiverse, following the ether patterns and the scales and sometimes bending them a little. The freescalers, on the other hand, took their chances and went all the way with whatever flow was fastest or what seemed to be going in their direction. Blown like dandelion spores on the cosmic winds, using their wits only in self-defense, they sometimes bleated like Easter lambs in their helpless terror. Their philosophy, if such it was, could not be understood by Corporal Porg. His attention was still on the screen where the freescalers had left their trails. But this was something new. "I'll stake hell to a herringbone if it isn't a sniffer sidling in at last," he declared. "What's news, my snouts?" "The Singularity's freescaling ace, Fearless Frank Force, is approaching the Now the Clouds Have Meaning ship of the famous chaos engineer Captain Billy Bob Begg," whiffled the little fellows. "There it is said they will parley." Unprecedented. Could this be the beginning of peace between chaos and the Singularity? An agreement to hold the balance by other means than this life-devouring rivalry? "Love will conquer, Porky," promises his new paramour, little Fanny Fun. "Love will conquer. It is what we play for. But how else shall we consume time? Loyalties are changing suddenly now. I am helpless. I have no side." "Love is our friend in this," says Corporal Porg. Captain Quelch, who is their prisoner, snorts with contempt. Nah, he bellows in mockery of the first beast whose brother he has so recently ripped up. "Let this loving peace develop and we shall cease to exist, you foolish dullards. It is your own doom you'll bring with this sentimental lust, this feeble guff. Love is never our friend. Should it triumph, we shall have no further purpose." He's drunk on super-refined carbons, filling their quarters with appalling fumes. He has already devoured an entire flagon of Ackroyd's Vortex water. be redundant. All we can do is play our bloody game. We're specialised creatures. If we succeed in establishing and holding the balance, we're done for, my dears. We go straight to limbo, darlings. Believe me, sat sapienti. You think I'm the cynic who set us up for this? God, do you think, or people like us, but a couple of million scales bigger, doing just what we're doing now, and maybe somebody's doing the same with them? Where does the game end? Maybe it's infinite. The strong shall devour the weak. That is the only law of nature I understand. How long does it go on for, my dears? How far does it go? Well, why question the unanswerable? Why don't we enjoy the game and play it forever, my darlings? If we're bound for limbo, it's inevitable. Death is a natural consequence of life. Since death is inevitable, we might as well make the most of life while we have it. Taste each moment. There isn't anything better than this for us, and it isn't the damned bad either. The game has been good to me. If the game stops, Corporal, so do we. Well, love cannot be our enemy, says Corporal Pork. Love is our salvation, says Fanny Fun. Our doom. Captain Quelch gulps the garbins like a goose gobbling smoke. Admit it, Pearl. Your creed must damn us all to inevitable and immediate death. We shall change the nature of the multiverse and therefore the terms of the human condition, says Pearl Peru from the shadows where she rests. Her war against Bullybop has exhausted her, and she yearns for Frank Force, wondering why he does not come to her. We shall change the nature of reality. We shall change our fates. The secret lies in our power over time. We can order reality so that love truly does rule the multiverse. No, tall order, dear. Captain Quelch pretended to return to his V. He had noted uneasily Jack Carriquasian's eyes peering out from Pearl's glittering head. He had gambled on the Egyptian being as upset by change as himself. Yet Mr. Carriquasian was taking untypical risks, was even strengthened by them. Was it time, Quelch wondered, to desert the singularity? Jupiter ex alto per Uria ridet amantum, as Ovid would have it. The very small talk of these people sickened him. How could they draw strength from such insubstantial whimsy? At this moment, however, their grip on their power seemed far surer than his own. What sort of minds, Quelch asked himself, could make sense of all that slithering, constantly regenerating and proliferating primary ether stuff, that untamable slime? He shuddered. He was revolted, even now merely to be in their company. His temper had not been good since he had lost his Peabody in the crude opening round as they had reached the Grail. He longed for the clean, open seas of the life he had left behind. The warm sense of the tideless Mediterranean where they had all been born so long ago, where Europe met Asia and Africa. He even felt nostalgic for Kent. Pearl groans. Where is Frank Force? Will he ever return from the lost universe? Oh, Frank, my love, is he gone with the fishlings? Look, says Corporal Pork, all his little eyes upon their brightening screens. Look, my friends, I think we are rescued. Something has holed the Singularity's false universe. Its hectic momentum has been reversed. It is the spammer game, bright with supercarbon filings, which swarm to her motherly gravity. Another new development. Fresh fishlings for her, I think, says Pearl Peru in satisfaction, but what became of the others? Only Captain Tench, venturing alone and determined into that vast and uncongenial universe, will ever discover the truth. Spammer has inadvertently blown up the Martian scaling station, causing a flux twist, which in turn has given Captain Billy Bob the coordinates she needs. The news comes through on the omniphone. In her ship, the Now the Clouds Have Meaning, Captain Billy Bob has free-scaled the length and breadth of the second ether, returning with fresh, detailed charts locked into her logic banks. It is just the knowledge that engineers need to develop much-needed new mathematics. Now they can, with confidence, challenge and perhaps even defeat the singularity. But still no news of Frank Force. It seems the rumour of his rescue by Captain Billy Bob was false. Pearl Peru begins to weep. Captain Billy Bob does not return in triumph. She is broken with shame. Having fallen through thousands of millions of scales in her wild search for the lost universe, her adventures have taken eons of subjective time. She and her crew have suffered impossible agonies and transformations, only through luck retaining a rough equivalent of their original psyches. But they failed to find the fishlings. Sam Oakenhurst blames himself. "And where is Frank?" demands Pearl, ungenerous in her desperation, careless of her friend's terrible burden. "Frank is safe," says Captain Billy Bob, shivering with the enormity of her guilt. "Frank at last is safe. He is with me." The voice on the omniphone became a dissipating echo. Pearl would learn the implications of this soon enough. 1. Acting spontaneously, Captain Billy Bob begged in order to save her ship and her crew and pull Frank Force from the plasma vortex which Capricorn Schultz had erected in their path, had repeated the impossible double-up maneuver, this time irrevocably combining both her body and her spirit with Frank Force's, melding them together into one permanently enjoined being. The power of chaos and singularity, combined with the ingredients of the uncanny fold suit broken into, have a rich and near-lethal fuel, had brought the Now the Clouds Have Meaning home. 2. "Sam Oakenhurst is dying," cries the Rose. "Quickly, Jack, he is dying of shame. He has lost control of his own logic." "Forgive me," begs Sam Oakenhurst of them all. "I set my sights on pain when I should have set them on love. It was my fatal confusion, Rose. Forgive me." But he will live for countless millennia, united with Captain Beg and Force. A tiny part of them. 3. Fearless Frank Force is helpless, bewildered by his coexistence with Captain Billy Bob. They share identical space and scale. Frank Force is not sure what to do or say now. Is he still alive? It had been Sam's decision. He had known it would kill him as an individual, but Pearl and all the others were saved. Jack Caraquasian would live to win where Sam Oakenhurst had lost. Jack Caraquasian looked at Sam Oakenhurst, their identities wavering, focusing, seeking one another out. Pearl's wonderful arms embraced her lover. "So long, Sam," she said. 4. It had been an extraordinary act, self-sacrifice and cleverness, taking great courage on Sam Oakenhurst's part, making himself the medium through which Captain Billy Bob and fearless Frank Force joined their strength together. He had reconciled law and chaos through the power of his loving sacrifice. No such act had ever succeeded in the history of the game. He has changed the rules. The Rose had not anticipated this. "Sam!" She is at her friend's remains. He lies on the vibrating floor of the Dornier while a violent storm crashes around them. Silver lightning glares against the windows. His strange skull lifts itself. "Sam, come back. You had some bad luck, that was all. You don't have to go. Look, Jack's released himself from Captain Peru." "It's a question of honour, Rose," says Sam Oakenhurst. "I pushed Captain Billy Bob to the decision. I guessed wrong, and I took them all with me. I caused them impossible agony, and for nothing. I said we were exploring, but I was really escaping. I owe this to them. I owe this to Pearl, to bring her lover home. Goodbye, Jack. I did my best. You still have a game or two to play, but I think I've improved your odds a little. 5. Have you learned nothing, Sam? Asks Jack Caraquasian, his grief turning to anger against his old partner. He looks back from where he sits at his controls. The windows are full of uneasy blackness slashed with crimson. Your honour will destroy you as it almost destroyed me. Your chivalry is the old hunter's finest disguise, his last resort. Don't you understand what you achieved? Well, I had a duty to Captain Billy Bob. I could not let her down. She is my main type. Well, what about Pearl Peru? Jack Caraquasian tries mockery to sting his friend back to the company, to save his human soul. Wasn't she also your main type once? He rises from his seat and kneels down. Goodbye, Pearl, says Sam Oakenhurst. Frank Force and Captain Billy Bob will find you. God is, after all, a tree. And he lets himself go. Sam Oakenhurst's mortal body dies in Jack Caraquasian's arms. What is left of him has gone to play in the service of entropy, to roam the quasi-infinite, a demigod blessed by death's eternal simplicities, a gloriously doomed soul. And the rose falls weeping upon Jack Caraquasian's weary shoulder. 6. As she comforts her friend, Paul Peru keeps half an eye on the controls of the Smollett sphere, waiting for a blink up from Professor Pop, who has installed his latest omniphonic equipment in the disused bellows chamber. This is a moment of grief, and she respects it. Pearl feels for the rose, feels for her friend, but she must remain vigilant now. The Singularity has pursued fearless Frank Force and is desperate to reach him before he consummates his love. They are confused by his readings and do not understand that he has been united with their greatest enemy through Sam Oakenhurst's noble act of reverse entropy. Old Reg's mystified grumble comes over the omniophone. I smell some perverse equation. Obscene mathematics. Can they have eaten our noble hero? Well, it could be their tradition, says evil Freddy Force, equally baffled. But they cannot be allowed to break any further rules. Our whole existence is suddenly at risk. 7. Oakenhurst's Loop, the Bluebonnet. Based on Caraquasian's gambit, a significant round in the game of time with far-reaching consequences achieved thus: SO to BBB and hold, BBB to FF and hold, FFF to PP, PP to JK, JK releases. Bracket resolves to BBB plus FFF and a significant wedding. BBB plus FF equals A plus PP, where chaos equals singularity, open bracket CS, close bracket, and held stable. An unprecedented resolution, which will be recorded as a classic, the famous cosmic balance. It will be spoken of in legend, close bracket. 8. Sam Oakenhurst has been the catalyst for the chemical wedding of fearless Frank Force and Billy Bob Big. That alone was a daring move, risking extinction of his individual soul. They learned the move from Jack Caraquasian, who had already established the precedent and the odds. Mr. Caraquasian had set the scene, visualizing the chances of the best outcome, and his gamble had paid off. It was probably the greatest success of his long career. But now the action was alarming even Captain Billy Bob. She speaks urgently to Pearl Peru. We cannot afford to deny tradition further. I am carrying too heavy a cargo. You have witnessed the consequences. This new logic could destroy us. We have no notion of its power or effect. Nothing will remain of Sam Oakenhurst in the first ether but his memory and his deeds. While Pearl Peru has great respect for Captain Billy Bob, she keeps her own counsel. She is confused by the strange attraction she now feels for the famous Chaos Engineer. It is the emotion she felt for Captain Force. It is almost uncontrollable, unmistakably sexual. Yet for all this rising lust, Pearl cannot agree with Billy Bob. Pearl now knows tradition is death, and orthodoxy will always cause the destruction of those who embrace it. It is the fundamental logic of the game of time. By refusing its logic, one alters its nature. It is thus that a round is won. Congratulations, Jack, says the Rose. Now we can rest. Jack Carriquasian knows that he survives and owes it to Sam, together with the conquest of his own preconceptions. He is free. He feels an equal measure of triumph, humility, and grief. Not knowing why, Captain Billy Bob has developed a reciprocally overwhelming desire for Pearl Peru. Has anyone ever mentioned how you look like Captain Wop Wop in the face? Are you related? As the news comes over the omniphone, announcing old Reg's peace proposals, we leave Pearl Peru joined in sexual congress with Captain Billy Bob, who had absorbed a partner to be alive again. It is how a god survives. Chapter 26, A Moral Multiverse. What Sam Oakenhurst had lost to his honour, Jack Carriquasian had gained over his presumption. The Rose kept a light hand on the wheel, but still wept for her stolen love, envying Jack his courage, his dramatically successful grasp of the game. You are a jackal, she says. You have the sweet hand of a grand master, clean, simple, ruthlessly definitive. I'm proud to know you, Jack. It was clear, however, that she wished he had died and not Sam. He looked for mockery and was surprised to find none. He tasted the triumph of his victory. He licked his handsome lips, grateful for Sam's sacrifice. He had also helped engineer it. The Dornier began to descend through pale wisps of lavender cloud beneath which Jack thought he could see the ocean, bright and calm in the sunshine, blue as his native Mediterranean. Video meliors proboque deteriora sequor, as the poet says. Ovid. Seems pretty perfect for this moment, don't you think, old boy? Oh, the wild rose blossoms on a little green place. Literacy is our most valuable gift, the source of memory and enduring myth, the wellspring of all we now call civilized, and the means by which we pull our common wise. Communicating thus from past to present, we improve our understanding of the world and our multiverse. I came to appreciate the true value of literacy when I tried to imagine the emotions of the first human being, realizing the implications and the potential of a written language. Video meliors, old chums. And here came Captain Quouch, wearing a stained linen suit, a gaudy gold watch chain in his waistcoat pockets, slightly faded carnation in his lapel, his battered white cap at a rake, bit of unlit cigar in his mouth, a small carpet bag in his hand, trudging from the back of the plane. My motto, anyway. Smelling faintly of cognac, he leaned over the Rose, staring down at the gentle waves which ascended to meet the flying boat. Good to be home, eh, Rosie? Jack Carriquasian saw that she was grateful for Quelch's company. She reached up and took the old pirate's arm. He chuckled affectionately, almost embarrassed. Mr. Caraquasian felt something like a cold knife cut, and he was free of Pearl Peru. She fell away behind him, intent on her fresh ambitions, her new love. The war amongst the angels was not over. Even now monstrous forms were moving through the colour fields, treading the silver roads between the worlds, their armies reassembling as they prepared for a further stage in the struggle. One reconciliation, no matter how impossible it had seemed, did not mean that the struggle was resolved. Only that those who fought, those who played the game of time, were aware that it was possible to establish new laws. Jack Caraquasian and Sam Oakenhurst, through their mighty alter egos, had changed the assumptions of the game forever. They had left their mark upon the multiverse, and the struggle between chaos and the singularity would never have the same character again. Mr. Caraquasian understood that there were many games to be played, and that perhaps he could be called upon to play again. But meanwhile he was content. He believed that he had earned his respite, his chance of tranquility and fulfillment, his reunion with Kalinda de Vero. The Rose let out a sigh. You always did know what surface your bread was buttered on, Horace. She touched her lips to Quelch's pitted wrist. Medio tutissimus ibis, dear girl. Any chance to dodge the old tempus edax rerum, you know. I say, Jack, look, old boy, down there's our island. The Rose was smiling, perhaps retrospectively. She brought the boat delicately to the waves and landed almost soundlessly in a little bay whose rocky walls were terraced by cream and white houses trimmed with royal blue or ochre. An entire town built up 3 sides of verdant cliffs which tumbled brilliant streams of silvery water straight into the sea. Men, women, and children leaned over balconies to witness their arrival. Dogs barked. There was a quay and a white stone mole. Beyond these were the red and blue striped awnings of cafes and restaurants. The harbour bustled with returning fishing boats seeking lanes amongst slender yellow yachts and fat black sailing dinghies. Expertly the Rose taxied her massive flying machine into a mooring at the mouth of the bay. She switched off the engines. She pointed at the rich tumble of villas, apartments, churches, and public buildings clustered above them, a natural pyramid. Kalinda will have seen us arrive. She'll be waiting for you on the quay, Jack. There's a steamer sails from the mainland next week for New Orleans. What is this place? Jack Caraquasian trembles intensely with the dawning realization of his release. Las Cascadas, dear boy, Quelch tells him. Our island paradise, our home. There's my old girl over there. Captain Quelch points at a handsome white yacht anchored near the mole. She bears the blazon Hope Dempsey, Casablanca. Quelch removes the stub of his cigar from his lips. Where did you think we were? It's home, old boy. Smell the air. Cleanest in the world. Yeah, there's nowhere to beat the Med, Jack. You know that. Captain Quelch unbuttons his collar and yawns. Would you believe I used to teach at a school in Kent? I was thinking of going over to have a look at the old place. I left under a bit of cloud. Never could abide red tape. Please tell me where we are, begged Mr. Caraquasian, rising unsteadily. Now you're safe enough, Jack. You helped create the security. The fault's only a legend here. Fading echo. The Rose unstrapped herself, got to her feet and began to collect her things from around her seat. This is an old city. It has always welcomed the likes of us, Jack. You might not want to leave. She looked up, offering him a quick grin. How did you find it, Rose? He asked. I was brought here by a lover long ago. She swung a duffel bag over her elegant shoulder. Better get ready, Jack. Near the flying boat's door, Jack Caraquasian stands before a full-length mirror. He is preparing for his love. He wears his tight-waisted black silk jacket, his best linen and fancy vest, his black trousers, his silver-studded boots. His long hair hangs straight to his shoulders, framing his handsome face. Al-Qadain is a kindly, clever jackal. He slips ancient rings on his fingers, scarabs and vultures, and Valak puts a fresh deck into his breast pocket. He smiles as he adjusts his cravat and remembers herons flying against the cypresses, the pale sun burnishing the waters of the bayou where 3 gold stains lay upon the surface. Pauvre Piero, moi petit beau. He clears his throat, unsurprised that his disease has not returned. He has defeated it. He remembers how she scooped his blood in her palms before she disappeared. Was that how she brought him here? By old-fashioned magic? But where else has he left his blood? The Rose is now joyfully eager to disembark. She makes her way past a whistling Captain Quelch and heaves open the big door. Already a boat, powered by an old-fashioned outboard, bounces across the calm waters towards them. Jack Caraquasian no longer disapproves of such engines. It's an extraordinary act of self-renewal. He has rejected all his earlier certainties and prejudices to win a handle on his own salvation. He begins to hum the strains of Grande Mamu, recalling how he and Kalinda danced on the deck of the Étoile du Memphis in the warm, drying air when they had first declared their love. Then he adjusts his cuffs, sets his hat on his head, glances one last time into the mirror and steps out again, brave as ever to claim his heart. "I'm feeling it, Sam," he says. Und das ist das Ende